Last-minute shake-up at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is there Taylor?
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, well-being expert and wellness coach, Darlene Marshall. And if your feeds are anything like mine, and they would be if you're a wellness coach, you work in wellness, you're a fitness professional, you're on a wellness or a fitness journey. Anyway, if, like that, your feeds are anything like mine, you have probably been seeing the phrase or the wording, something about somatic practices these last few years. And it always feels to me like, ooh, somatic. Like I feel like I can't say something about somatic without going, ooh, but that's just me. Anyway, often it feels to me like there are some practitioners out there who are using the word somatic, but that they don't fully understand its meaning. And the reasons that I feel that way are twofold. First is that I have clients or potential clients that come in for a consult that will unpack with me things that other practitioners or maybe even their doctors have said to them that leave that client or patient really confused about what the word somatic means, somatic practices, how they use them in their life, what that has to do with their symptoms, and the stuff that they want. So that's kind of category one, is where I start to ask probing questions and I come away with the sense that maybe this clinician didn't fully understand the thing they were telling this person who's now speaking to me. Okay, and then the other category, the other place that I'm seeing like, oh, maybe that person doesn't really understand the thing they're talking about is the plethora of content about somatic practices, about this word somatic, that if you understand what's going on with somatic under the hood, just doesn't make any sense. And I have a perfect example for you. I have been saving this example in my pocket because I've been planning to do this episode for a long time. All right, so about a year and a half ago, I'm talking to my mom about this person that she follows on Instagram who at that time had begun to call themselves a somatic practitioner. And my mom was hearing this word somatic coming from them pretty regularly. And the way that she was talking about it, this person apparently had just started using the phrase somatic embodiment. And when I started hearing about like somatic embodiment, I said to my mom, do you know what somatic means? And she says, yeah, it's like healing trauma. And I'm like, no, somatic comes from the Greek word soma, which just means body. And then she makes that confused face for a second, the like information buffering, like the wheel that spins on your apps. So she was buffering and loading for just a second. And then she goes, well, doesn't embodiment mean body? And I'm like, And she goes, so they're just saying body? I'm like, yeah, Ma, they are just saying body to sell you stuff because it sounds cool. And that's the kind of stuff I'm seeing, where words that should have meaning, and, you know, I'm a writer and a podcast host and an instructor and a college professor, like words are really important to me because so often what I'm interested in is communicating understanding. And so when words become buzzy and get like hollowed out of all of their delicious essence, it just irks me super hard. So today I want to share a bit more with you about the somatic, about what somatic practice actually is, what these words mean, what if those words are getting trademarked and sold, which is just wild to me, and where actually these nuggets of understanding somatic practice could actually be useful, have been useful to me, could be useful to you, and are likely useful to like most people living in a modern context. So, as we have established, somatic is from the Greek word soma, which means body. So it's like of the body stuff. Cool. We're all about body stuff here on Better Than Fine. So like, yeah, that sounds like our jam. Typically, when we call something a somatic practice, it's one that's putting you more in tune with the sensations, the experiences of your own body, right? Soma, somatic, body. Makes sense. And if you're a fan of this show, you might have heard me say plenty of times, either emotions are information or feelings are information. And essentially what I'm saying there is that like when we learn how to tune into what's going on in the body, we actually learn a whole lot, just like unlocking a language. And I think somatic practices can be a really interesting Rosetta Stone for accessing that language. Now, if hearing me say, ooh, emotions are information, feelings are information, and something goes off in your brain container and you want to hear a lot more information about that, we're not going to do that in today's episode because we did that episode already. If you go back to June of 2022, there's an episode called Emotions are Information, all about that concept. So anyway, somatic practices are those that tune you into the radio signal of the information coming from your own body. And many of us have been tuning out that signal for a long time. And if you really think about it, even if you didn't have crazy stuff happen to you, you go to school, you sit there and you're told to think, right? It's all about your brain container and you're locked in a desk. And if you, like me, are a fidgeter, you get told, quiet down, stop wiggling, stop distracting the other kids. And again, if you're like me, it's because like, well, my body is uncomfortable. It's meant to move. It needs to move. And you are trained over time through the lack of social acceptance that comes with being that kid to suppress it, to dissociate it. And even if you're not the fidgeter kid, you're still seeing the fidgeter kid get after it from the instructor, from the teacher. And then you're not going to be the one that does that stuff either because you want to be socially accepted. And over time, we all just learn to suppress the feedback coming from our body. Or maybe you have had something happen that makes your body feel like an unsafe place to be in. That's real, right? An accident, a severe illness, an assault, things that would be traumatic to the experience of being yourself, that then you start to tune out that discomfort, that feedback, you dissociate. And obviously those are some extreme examples, but they're often the ones that are used to sell these things that are being labeled as somatic. And they're actually not the only reason that this stuff can be helpful. So let's talk a little bit more about what this word means, about where it comes from, and kind of what's going on under the hood when we talk about somatic. There are two branches of the nervous system. Autonomic, which is also very in vogue right now to talk about the vagus nerve and vagus nerve stimulation and how does that impact trauma and oh my God. But the autonomic nervous system is all of the automatic functions of the body. It's the stuff that you can't control. And the autonomic, the stuff you can't control, is what governs fight or flight, and its opposite, rest and digest. So something intense happens, or you're like gearing up to make a presentation at work or whatever, you need to marshal up resources, you fight or flight. And then when that's over, or it's time to relax at the end of the day and it's time to chill out, parasympathetic, the other mode of the autonomic nervous system, is the relaxation response, rest and digest. And I like to think of it like a thermostat. Something happens and we like need the heat. The heat's going to kick on, right? That's fight or flight. And then like, oh, nope, too hot in the room, or, it's not a cold day anymore. It's a warm day. We can turn it down and maybe even turn on the air conditioner, rest and digest. But I want you to think about just a second, what happens when you're stressed out? Your heart rate increases, your breathing accelerates. Maybe you get really hot, your muscles get tense, maybe your throat goes dry. You can't control any of that in the reaction unless you really condition it. That's automatic, that's autonomic. And then the other stuff, the somatic branch, okay, catch that word there, the somatic branch of the nervous system is the stuff that we can control. So this is like motor control, this is moving your body around, and the sensory feedback coming from like, where is my body in space? Maybe you listen to the interoceptive episode, some of it's interoceptive. So the cool thing is that there are functions in the body that bridge the gap. Some of those things: breathing, swallowing, movement and posture, blinking and eye movement. Right? Think back to the stuff that we just said about what happens when things get a little dialed up on you. Right? Throat goes dry, heart races, you feel kind of hot, your muscles get tight. But breathing, swallowing, movement and posture, blinking and eye movement cross the bridge between the somatic and the autonomic. And if you want to hear huge nerd out on the nervous system as a whole, if you want to go even deeper on that, yep, there's a nervous system episode. That one's from May of 2022. But right now, you're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and today we are talking about, are somatic practices legit? What's going on here? What is the deep dive in the skinny on the somatic? One of the principles in my work that has been a principle in my work for the 13 years I've been in the fitness and wellness space has been that your body will adapt to the most consistent stimulus that it is given. Now, for many of us, we get to choose that stimulus. So like exercise, movement, good food, water, etc. Some people don't have that much agency depending on their circumstances, but generally your body is going to adapt to the most consistent stimulus that it's given in the short term and the long term. If you're someone who has been consistently moving your body, sleeping in a regular circadian cycle, eating good food, you're going to get into a stasis place where you potentially can be better and better in the expression of your body. Or your body adapts to the most consistent stimulus it's given. It might mean that you've had something disruptive happen in your life. We talked about what some of those disruptions can look like. And maybe that disruption goes on for a long period of time and you get used to it, or you have something so disruptive that it takes you a long time to move through it and past it, and you get used to it then. And I want you to think of that kind of like the hum of the refrigerator in your kitchen, or the buzz of the space heater here in my office. Unless I tune into those sounds, I don't hear them. I don't notice them. But instead of your refrigerator, think of it like the ambient tension and discomfort in your body. Right? Like think of being uncomfortable or not at ease because something uncomfortable is happening, maybe a situation that you're in. If you sustain that discomfort for a long period of time, you'll begin to tune it out, just like the refrigerator noise. And if it's tension in the body, either from your stress response or something really, disruptive like trauma, you're going to be stressed. You're going to hold that tension in your body. And you become more and more rigid. And then like the refrigerator noise, if you held it long enough, you're just going to get used to it. And maybe at a certain point, you don't even notice that it's happening. Maybe you didn't notice it was happening at that time because you were dealing with whatever the problem was. Now, over time, you tuned out those sensations of discomfort. You get used to the stress. So does your nervous system, both branches. So the autonomic nervous system, the automatic function, maybe thinks that its normal set point for, again, the thermostat, right? The temperature baseline got crept up. Kind of like if you live in a warm climate, like Eric, our producer, lives somewhere way warmer than me here in upstate New York. His ambient baseline for temperature and mine, totally different. I get way too hot if I'm down south, and they get way too cold if they hang up here in the winter. Well, when we think about this ambient level of like what normal is, what baseline is, this kind of stress, as you become acclimated to it, this sense of baseline can creep into activation, into staying stressed. This is what chronic stress looks like. And in your somatic nervous system, can become the sensation of tuning out discomfort or tension or disease. I hate saying it that way, but like a lack of ease. I don't mean disease like oh, stress is what causes everything. I'm not saying that. There are also structural changes to the body when this happens. So when we don't use musculature, we don't connect to the sensations there, you get nerves that are being pruned back. Tight muscles eventually become weaker and weaker from not being fully used. And then so over time, the structures of the body, let's say it's in the posture, right? When you look at somebody who's been chronically stressed, their posture is different. Well, the body's physical structures then begin to adapt to that new position. So what do we do? Well, even if you are just someone whose body is tight and sore, or you don't have good posture, it doesn't have to be trauma that can make these tools useful. And there's also evidence showing, it's growing evidence, it's early evidence, that somatic practices help to mitigate the symptoms of PTSD. We're going to talk about that in a second. So the really cool thing about all of this is that these somatic tools bridge the gap. They're called somatic tools, but they bridge the gap between the somatic and the autonomic. And remember, I said there's 4 things that are in that bridge: breathing, swallowing, movement and posture. So like the muscles that move us around and hold us up, and then blinking and eye movement. Okay. So somatic practices use these 4 categories of tools to help people build a mindful relationship, a connection with their bodies. And some somatic nervous system tools can re-regulate the autonomic nervous system. If you want to nerd out about that, we did a whole episode on breathing in the nervous system. That is actually one of my favorite episodes that we have ever done of this show. It's called Breathing Exercises Before Bed. It was September of 2023. And I love it just because when I found that study, I nerded out so hard because I was like, oh, I've known that this thing is true for a long time, but I haven't seen science for it yet. Here is the science for it. Go nerd out if you're into that. So a bunch of different techniques have sprung up under this umbrella of somatic long before the science had caught up. And just like magnets were once considered witchcraft before we understood how magnetism worked, for a long, long time, the claims in some of these disciplines were considered snake oil, right? They're like, oh, breath work can balance your nervous system. Yeah, actually, it really can. So things like yoga, Tai Chi, and Qigong, Feldenkrais method. I remember the first time I ever heard about Feldenkrais method was in a book called The Brain That Changes Itself. And I nerded out so hard. I dug around on the internet for hours until I found a bootleg copy of an old pamphlet of Feldenkrais practices. And then I laid on my living room floor meditating for an hour, just slightly moving my hands and breathing. And then I took the best nap I've ever had in my life because I was so relaxed. It was wild. Eye opener. Anyway, and then Alexander technique, another great example where people could feel, but we couldn't measure. So other people said it was nonsense. All 4 of those disciplines involve breath work, controlled movement, and rhythm. And some yogic disciplines also involved timed and structured swallowing in their cueing. I even had a yoga teacher once who did a bunch of eye stuff long before I knew any of this eye cueing that I found absolutely fascinating. And I couldn't believe how effective it was. And that was before I had ever heard of EMDR. And now I can't tell you how many people in my life are doing EMDR therapy for trauma, which is neat. Like one of the coolest things about being alive right now and loving both science and these like esoteric movement traditions is watching science measure the stuff that I was told growing up was magical thinking, was like too woo and too abstract and the devil and witchcraft or whatever. And now science can tell me why it works. I think that's awesome. I love it. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I am your host, Darlene Marshall. And today we're asking the question, are these somatic practices legit? Like, which one? How? How do you tell? So there's one big old thing that I really want to touch on when it comes to talking about the somatic together on this show. And that big old chestnut is trauma. Because there are a lot of people out on the internet talking about trauma, making claims about trauma, making claims about somatic practices in trauma, talking about being trauma informed. And I'm generally torn on it. And here's why. Personally, I am someone who has been diagnosed with complex trauma. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD in my 20s. Much of my own work has been in pursuit of tools to help me. I didn't even know that that's what I was doing, but I just knew I felt good when I moved. And it's taken a lot of work on myself. I have tried a lot of weird stuff. Sometimes that work was done with clinical licensed mental health professionals, and sometimes it wasn't. I have had therapists, clinical licensed mental health professionals, do real harm to me psychologically. And I've had therapists who have been incredible, absolute anchors in my life. I have had non-therapists flirting at the edges of their scope of practice do harm. And I have also had non-therapists who are way outside of what the United States legal system would call a scope of practice. And they have done life-changing good for me because they were very talented. They were trained in their lineage, their discipline, and they knew what they were doing. And I have also had non-therapeutic, self-appointed healers do things with and for me that were unquestionably illegal in these places that we were doing them, that if I didn't know what I know about myself and the body would have done irreparable harm to me. And so I appreciate the value and the need for oversight and training and for respect for these tools, especially the ones that are from millennia old esoteric traditions, because those tools were not widely available. They were only done at the higher levels with these higher level practitioners of these esoteric traditions, because you had to prepare to earn the right to even attempt them because of the harm that they could do. And so, like, for example, yoga is not fancy stretching. Yoga is a spiritual discipline that is thousands of years old. And I have seen people doing conventionally available yogic practices that have hurt them, like really deeply hurt them. Another great example is psychedelics, because that's another very powerful tool that bridges between the somatic and the autonomic. And the perfect example to this is always kaikion. If you've never heard that word, it was an ancient Greek spiritual rite as part of the Elysian mysteries. Ooh, kaikion was a psychedelic that was given to some initiates, and it was guarded because in many, many places in the world, in many, many traditions and times, you didn't just drop acid or take shrooms outside of a spiritual context because it was considered dangerous. It was too disruptive. It created too much malleability. You could go insane. Which is not to say that I'm like gatekeeping psychedelics in our culture. We've had psychedelic experts on the show. But I think we want to consider how we're using these tools, how we're talking about them, and the harm that can be done. So, and yes, but I think in the hands of an experienced practitioner who is a good communicator, there is a growing body of evidence that somatic practices can help to improve PTSD symptoms. Okay. And I think that one of the questions we really need to be asking ourselves as individuals, as practitioners, as people who are chucking these words around, is what does it mean to heal trauma? I personally have a pretty strong reaction to the phrase healing trauma. In my experience, it's not that my trauma disappears. And this isn't just me. This is also working with clients who have trauma, who are always working with an allied practitioner. Thank you very much. I don't heal it and like develop some beautiful psychic scar where the light comes in. Sorry, I've always hated that language. What I do is I integrate it. I learn from it. I invite it in and I interview it. I make it my companion and it becomes a functional part of me. And then I have the chance, like I'm doing right now in sharing with you, to use that information to help people, even if those people are just myself. And I don't use the trauma in an exploitative way. I allow it to inform my life and my choices and how I communicate. And in that way, it allows me to help myself first understand myself and the world, and then help other people to understand themselves and how they fit in the world. And I think that somatic practices can really help you build better relationship with yourself so that you can integrate whatever is up with you, whatever you've been tuning out from the information that your body gives you, because feelings are information. Somatic practices teach us how to tune into that information in a way that we can handle, in a way that we can metabolize. If you are with a really, really good practitioner, it also will teach you how to speak the body's language and then learn from that wisdom. I used to say when I was a personal trainer and I first got onto social media as a trainer, thinking like, oh, maybe I could do some of this influencer stuff, that there's wisdom locked in the body. You just have to learn how to find it. So then the question becomes, well, how do we know the difference? So this is very much my opinion, is if a practitioner that you are considering working with talks about this stuff like it is magic, start asking them some questions. And I'm not saying it's not magic. I think magic exists. It doesn't mean that we can't explain it. But start asking them some questions until you understand enough to trust them. And if they can't help you understand, consider not working with them. And this is why. Richard Feynman has a great quote. I love this quote. If you want to master something, teach it. Okay? But I think the inverse is also true, that if someone can't teach a concept, they have not mastered it. And just because someone took a weekend course does not mean that they know how to be trauma-informed or work as a somatic practitioner. There is a deeper understanding that I think is necessary to be safe and effective. And I don't mean necessarily teach it like an instructor, like the instructor teaches the yoga teacher training. I mean teaching it enough that their client can understand it in the way that they need to, right? In order to be a successful client or patient. And I've got a lot of smart clients. They're smart, talented, gifted, high-achieving people that come to me more confused from the conversations they've had with other practitioners about this stuff. And I know that they can understand because I help them understand in the same way that I hopefully have helped you understand. So what that tells me is that there is a lot of people out there talking on their channels, producing content, using these phrases that have a lack of mastery. And that lack of mastery could hurt some people. Now, do I think that breathing and yoga is going to? No. This is purely the trauma conversation that I'm referring to. So what's the deal with somatic practices? Let's put some buttons on this. They're tools. They are tools that are sometimes very powerful. They can be effective in the right context. But I think all of us in the arc of our lives can really benefit from a more meaningful relationship with our body. And I think that meaningful relationship with our body then helps us find a more meaningful relationship with our whole selves. And there is some evidence that these tools can help with the symptoms of PTSD. That is not the same thing as healing trauma. But they also help us tune into ourselves. They are effective at helping us to manage stress and increase our resilience, and also increase the enjoyment of our bodies and our lives. It's not only about the downside, it's about the upside too. And I think that is cool. And I also am grateful to live in a time when science and these esoteric practices are starting to have a bridge between themselves too. I also want to make a shameless plug for my own practice here, because if learning this stuff sounds really interesting to you, and you would like a chance to experience the somatic, I am hosting a retreat on June 13th in Round Top, New York, called Root to Rise. We'll be doing a lot of this kind of stuff because this is my jam. Building a relationship with your body, tapping into your authenticity, learning how to feel your feelings and tune that radio in and speak the language of yourself. And I'm really excited because this is actually the very first time I am ever making my retreat available to the public. I've only ever taught it in private corporate contexts or by invite only. So this is the very first time that you, dear listener, could choose to join me live and in person for a retreat. If you would like to check out the details for Root to Rise, it is at my website, darlene.coach/retreat. And I really hope that you'll consider coming because it's going to be a real good time. And of course, as always, I would love to hear your feedback. You can email me. It is info@darlene.coach. My Instagram is also darlene.coach. My website is, wait for it, darlene.coach. And if you're a fan of the show, I hope that you subscribe. Thank you to everyone who's written us a review, share, like, comment, do the thing. I always want to hear from you because I love doing the show for you. And I hope you love it as much as I do. And if you don't, I want to know why so we can make it even more better. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves and be well.